Welcome, everybody. This is a special edition of Event Marketing Redefined, a new thing that we're doing. We just got back from Exhibitor Live, tons of great takeaways. So today what we're doing is just a little recap, and we're doing it differently than our normal format because, as you know, normally it's a webinar format. This, we want it to be more of a town hall. So here's what that means. I'm just here to tell you what's happening, but right after, Matt and Mandy are going to jump into their takeaways. We're going to spend about maybe 30 to 40 minutes with Matt's goals and takeaways, Mandy's goals and takeaways. And once that's over, if you have a takeaway that you want to share, I will bring you up on the stage. I'll put the spotlight on you, but this is a interactive session, and I'm going to shut my yapper and let you all go. Matt, take us away, buddy.
Awesome. What's going on, everybody? And welcome to Event Marketing Redefined. As Pablo kind of explained, we're going to do stuff a little differently. Exhibitor Live was last week in Nashville, and it's a really great show. And I think as we were leaving, we were thinking to ourselves, hey, let's do a recap. Let's have a conversation. Let's see if we can get away from our usual show format, which is where we have a singular guest. Myself and that guest pretty much talk and everybody listens. We do engage in the chat and take questions, but we felt like doing a little bit of a town hall might be a better way of hosting a discussion and getting more people to get involved. Interestingly enough, I met Mandy on the show floor. So Mandy has been a listener of the podcast, an attendee of our live show. So once we realized we were both going to be there, we connected on LinkedIn, we decided to meet, we sat and we talked. And I think one of the big things for us, and again, this is our takeaways, right? So I am CEO of Rockaway Exhibits and Events. So a lot of my takeaways are going to come from being the CEO of Rockaway, as well as just the industry. We exhibited in 2023, and Exhibitor Live was really going through a pretty large transition. From my side, really nice to see the transition rolling into this year. For us, like one of the best things that happened this week was with our podcast, with our live show, with the conversations we've had. We met so many people on the floor that are a part of our community, listening to our show. And our conversation with Mandy was really excellent. Pablo almost couldn't get his head out of the convention center hall after the conversation. Like I almost had to stop Mandy. I was like, Mandy, stop telling us all of this positive things that I know Pablo wants to hear because he's a little bit of the brainchild behind all this. So one of the takeaways I had essentially is the community. And for us was really awesome to meet, see people in person. I had countless conversations like the one I had with Mandy. I had people stop me and say, hey, you're Matt, right? And I'm like, yes. And they're like, oh, I listened to your show. And it's like, oh, wow, that's great. And then ask them for feedback. What can we do better? What can we do different? So Mandy, why don't you say hello to everybody? Mandy runs events for Seagate. Man, you guys are personal storage device, right? You guys are like a leader in personal storage device. I know you do a bunch of other things, but if you want to just, say hello and tell us what you're doing.
Hi, yep. Yeah, Seagate actually been around for more than 40 years. We are actually most established in the hard drive industry at the hyperscaler level, actually. So essentially, what I say is, as someone who's actually not a very technically inclined person that works for a very technical company, if it has anything to do with the management, movement, or storage of data, we do it. And that's really the easiest way for me to explain it. So there's a whole spectrum of drives from the data center hyperscaler size all the way down to personal drives. We kind of have an inside joke with the events team. How many gigabytes, how many terabytes can you have in your backpack at one time? I'm never anywhere without at least 3 terabytes of storage in my backpack. So, and actually I've had to use them. So that's kind of the quick Seagate sort of story. But I have been there for about 2 years. Actually, it'll be 2 years this week. But my history is on the supplier side. So I've been in trade show for 30 years. 28 of my 30 was on the supplier side in operations, logistics, and project management for exhibit houses. So I have been in this industry for a very long time. I'm a legacy child. My mother was on the EDPA board of directors in the 90s. So I have grown up. It is in my DNA. So that's kind of my backstory. And a couple years ago, decided to leap over the fence and see what it would be like to essentially be one of my clients. And it has been tremendously enjoyable. And opportunities like this and connections that I've made via all of the different collaborative opportunities are just serving to inspire me more to learn more and to get better at this position.
Mandy, that's awesome. I think so. One of the things that we want to talk about today was when I spoke with Mandy, and as well as I spoke with so many other people, event managers, event marketers that were at the show, I was really curious. And I was wondering, like, what exactly are you doing here, right? I think there is, as everybody knows, there's a big component to Exhibitor Live, which is the CTSM program. I talk about it on our show all the time. I think it is the best of the best when it comes to education. I could go on and on in terms of how I think event managers and marketers need the education. It's not really taught in colleges and on and on. You know, we'll get to that. Mandy, let's go into what your goal. You're going to Exhibitor Live, you're attending. Why were you going?
So for me this year, I actually didn't think I was going to get an opportunity to go. I have 3 overlapping events that are taking up every spare minute of my time, but I was encouraged to see if I could make it work. And I actually only went for one day. I was only there for Tuesday, which, obviously felt like a miss because I would have loved to have stayed for the entire thing. There were so many classes that I wanted to take and things I wanted to listen in on, but they're goals for next year. But for me, my goals were pretty specific. I was looking at design inspiration. I always want to see what's new. I have a really great agency that works with me in my exhibit house. We do a lot of work together. It's very collaborative, but because of my history, I spend a lot of time still trying to understand what's new and what's in the market. What's the newest thing in design and in technology? So that was a big part of my goals, was basically fact finding, pictures, videos, talking to different suppliers and understanding what they have. Also, from a technical perspective, seeing what was out there. And then a big part, also sustainability. So I wanted to see, it's a big, hot item. Seagate has some very large sustainability initiatives, and I am of the belief that as an organization, if we're putting that out there, we need to walk the talk in our exhibits. We need to really be putting that forward in our presence on the show floor. And much to the chagrin of many of my leadership, I have killed printing. I have killed most swag, landfill style swag. But because I'm doing that, I feel it's my responsibility to research what's out there and make those connections. And then finally, the collaborative effort. I really, getting to meet you and connecting with people that I've met through your show, as well as talking to Jessica, the exhibitor advocate, talking to women in exhibitions. One of the things that I feel is so valuable about this event is just the opportunity to collaborate with people that you wouldn't otherwise have a chance to sit down and have a coffee with and make those real connections beyond the LinkedIn world that really just serve to help you as you move on in this position.
One thing we were talking about earlier, which I think is really relevant to what you're saying about going there to see technology, to see products, to gain an understanding of sustainability efforts, what's happening, was you and I were talking a little bit about kind of like the exhibit house side and the supplier side, right? And I thought you had a really interesting take on it, which I think you should share. Because I think what I noticed at Exhibitor is you do have a section of younger event marketers that are there. They are learning, they are new, their teams are bringing them, which I encourage to the end of the earth at this point. I think the sooner you can get people in these jobs that are learning right away, the more results a company is going to get. But that comfortability of being able to go to a supplier that has a new technology and have a conversation, and that supplier saying, hey, like, I don't really sell to you directly.
Right.
And then what is that younger person? They're like, oh, okay. And it's just kind of what do they do? Whereas someone who's experienced is actually saying, well, hey, that's great. You know what I mean? It's a different conversation. So give us your take on that, because I think that's important for people to hear.
Yeah. And so because of my history in the industry, I've been to exhibitor show many times. I've been to shows of this nature that don't even exist anymore. And I have made a lot of connections. There are a lot of people that work at exhibit houses and different suppliers that I've known for literally decades. But one of the things that I kind of encountered a couple years ago when I attended the very first year I started as an exhibitor was I got a little bit of resistance when I would walk into certain suppliers' booths and want to talk to them. Their first question was, well, who's your exhibit house? Because a lot of their objectives are to connect with those exhibit houses, to have those collaborations that ultimately benefit me in the long run, because exhibit houses are able to offer the most up-to-date in design and different kind of technology. But I really felt this year it was a much more open forum. And one of the things that I would really encourage someone new to this, and I consider myself new on this side, is to gain that understanding of the materials, of the different opportunities out there for your booth design and for the elements you encourage. I think a lot of people in my position rely on their exhibit house as their one sole source of information, that what that designer is bringing you, what that exhibit house is bringing you is the best of the best. And if you've got a great relationship with them and you trust them, that's fantastic. But for me, I wanted to take ownership of it. And I wanted to walk into those places immediately knowing they're not going to sell to me directly, but being able to have an understanding of what they're bringing to the market and going back to my exhibit house and saying, hey, I had this great connection. A great example is Brewmark. I do a lot of work in trying to make sure that our booth is as many sustainable materials as possible. Brewmark is debuting a sustainable carpet this summer, and I absolutely intend to have that be part of my next booth design. Brewmark can't sell to me directly. I've known James for a zillion years, but we had a great conversation. They put me on the launch list to make sure that I get all the materials as soon as they come out. And I'm just going to pass that along to my exhibit house. It's the same thing with my AV providers. I met with 5 of them because I'm trying to achieve something for NAB that my current suppliers can't do. They were all more than happy to talk to me and give me all the information I need. And I immediately connect them with my exhibit house and form this collaborative effort rather than being segmented away and not understanding really, truly what's being done on my behalf. So I would encourage them.
I think it's interesting with what you're saying there, like those discussions that you're having with people. I would even encourage, because I know there's event, managers, marketers there that are looking for a new exhibit house or examining their exhibit house. We'll
Sure.
call it exhibit house.
I did 2 years ago.
If you were my client, right, I would argue with you that I wouldn't want you to bring me that stuff. I would want you to put me to the test, because I should know that Brewmark is now making sure that their carpets don't hit landfills, right?
Right.
I should understand when you say, hey, there's a technology problem I'm trying to solve. I should be going to A and B and C and say, hey, we have relationships there. So I would say, maybe for you, just as a little bit of advice, I would keep that a little close to the chest at times, right? And test them a little, see how resourceful they are, see if they're willing to go that extra step, that extra mile to bring in solutions. Then you might be able to ride in on your white horse and say, hey, I know you can't do this, but I know how to do this. I have a
Yeah.
contact for
A
you.
big part of it for me is the collaboration, though. I really feel that people in my position should be encouraged to collaborate with as many industry suppliers as possible. And it
Yep.
shouldn't be a gatekeeping situation. Like, we really need to educate ourselves and arm ourselves with that knowledge. Because for me, that actually, not so much with what my exhibit house thinks of that kind of interaction, but it reflects on to my leadership very positively, that they know that I really understand what's out there and what the capabilities are. And I take that with me everywhere I go. Plus, you trade show project manager for 20 years. Like, there's no way I'm going to give that up. It's too much fun.
I love it. Do you have anything else that maybe from a goal standpoint of yours that you accomplished or that you saw, or like a key takeaway?
For me, a big part of it was the sustainability initiative. I'm
Mhm.
very interested in that, and I don't need to keep going back to it. But one of the things that I really loved was I saw that Aluvision was giving presentations on sustainability. They have amazing information on their website, but to be able to see people speaking about it is really great. And also, B Matrix had a carbon footprint calculator in their space that somebody could literally walk into the space and enter information in real time and be able to get an understanding of where they'd be able to make improvements and apply it specifically to trade show, which is really the part that is missing from a lot of sustainability information, is being able to apply it specifically to our participation in the industry and understanding that you really do have that kind of control, and it's not quite as challenging as it may seem if you break it down for its steps. I thought that information, and I saw it in multiple places on the show floor, was really, really important.
That's good. I was thinking, my team and I were talking about this prior, like one of our big takeaways or that we had was I definitely saw an effort from the exhibitor group to step up the show without question. And I think
Yes.
that that needs to be something that, not everybody was there, right? And you'll get different takes from different people, but I want people to know that there was an absolute conscious effort to step up that show. With that said, do I think it is where they want it or where everybody else wants it? No, absolutely not. But things take time, right? But
Yep.
are those steps there? Are those points there of trying to make something? I believe so. So that is definitely one takeaway from our side. Another takeaway from our side is that we were just absolutely blown away with all the people like yourself that are listening to the podcast and that are connecting with one another, that are creating their own peer groups, that are having discussions together. That was a really big piece for us, is how many people were on the show floor that we knew from the show, from the live shows, that we connected with and had conversations. We're honestly kind of surprised and floored by the number of people, which was really cool.
The visibility that this event brings to people who are in both our positions, honestly, and the connections that it has the ability to foster, I think are invaluable. In one day on the show floor, literally 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., I probably talked to 50 people and had
Mm.
so many good connections that I was able to follow up on immediately. And the other thing that it really does, and if anything, if I were to, to be so bold as to offer Exhibitor Show any of my advice, I would say that it actually needs to be marketed stronger to people in my position. I feel like it's still viewed very much as a supplier old home week. It's everybody getting together and
Yeah.
you talk to each other a million times when you're on the supplier side and meeting up with those people, and that's great. But I feel like with some of the advent of things, of the collaborative efforts that are being put behind connecting people in my position, I feel
Mm.
like they could actually go stronger. I took my boss to this show 2 years ago. She's been in events for 15 years. She'd never heard of it. She had
Mm.
no idea it was even a thing. And then since even starting this position, I've met people and learned of other events that are global events of this nature that I didn't know existed. So I really feel like they could really be pushing the CTSM and the educational aspect and the collaborative aspect. They could go harder with that marketing. I really believe they could.
So that's one thing that I'm interested in, which is essentially the sell to leadership for the cost that everything to be there for a couple of days and to go, right? Because to me, I'm curious. I want to hear from you I want to know, if you're going to bring a team or you're going to go individually, like how do you sell it to leadership? What's the ask look like? What would you recommend to someone that says, hey, like they've not given me clearance, they've not said yes, or like, what's the hurdles there? What hurdles are people jumping over to be able to go to make it a yearly thing?
I think a big part of it is understanding what the metrics are for you in this position in terms of what your leadership looks at. So for me, the way that I sold it, and part of this, it benefits me having the history that I do. They see immediately the relationships that I foster. They know that if I'm faced with a challenge in the field, whether it's at a trade show or one of our Seagate owned events, which are really large scale events all over the world, chances are I'm going to know somebody who can get us out of a jam in any number of places. And this event just fosters those connections. It allows me to keep those connections and grow them so that I am that answer for them. But in the metric for them is also making sure that from a trade show presence perspective, that our designs are not getting stale, that we are using the most current and the most up-to-date technology. We're a technology company, and I need to make sure that we really are meeting those marks. That after every show, I submit a sustainability report. And what I do in the addendum is I call attention to where I sourced a new sustainability effort, where I learned about it, where the information came from. I will try to track it back to an article, track it back to a podcast or something of that nature. I did it with your podcast when you had Al on and he connected me with who could recycle my SEG graphics. That's now part of my report. So it's just meeting those
That's
benchmarks
excellent.
and being able to speak back to my leadership and say, hey, I know the most up-to-date design elements. I know the most up-to-date tech elements. I'm learning the most up-to-date and learning from the best in the industry on what exhibit sustainability looks like. Here's a whole new slew of audience engagement, the quest of all of us. How do we get the audience engaged? And here's a video of AI robot arms drawing sketches, in real time that people can take away that we've branded. So being able to report back to them and show how I would apply it and include suggestions for what the next event is. It's just really about proving the value of what I've learned and immediately being able to apply it to my show schedule. That's how I sold it.
It's kind of like anything else that we've talked about a lot is like, I think event managers, event marketers need to get better at building a business case for something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like one of my thoughts that I got to this as I was thinking about it is essentially this idea of like, name somebody or like a corporate organization that is managing and is entrusted with a budget as large as an event manager or marketer is. And then second piece on that is a role that has the lack of training, the lack of education.
Right.
So you have event managers, you have event marketers working for huge corporate companies. I've worked with some of them. They have no formal training, yet they're managing $1 million,
Yep.
$500,000. So to me, it's easy for me to say that I'm not in the seat, but essentially that would be somehow I'd have to find a way to mold that to leadership and be like, hey, by the way, it's a lot of money that I'm in control of here. We need to get results. We need to build a business case. I'm telling you, like, education would be amazing for me.
Yeah.
So I can get better at this and get better at managing that money. I'm not sure how to phrase that for people, but I think if anyone were to be listening to this on the podcast that's thinking, wow, I would love to go to Exhibitor Live. I would love to go get education. I would love, how do you pitch to business? I would find a way to take what I just said and what you just said and put it into something for them.
Yeah. And CTSM, that's one thing. I have all these years in the industry, and I've always known it existed, but now all of a sudden I'm like, I have to get that. That is my goal. That is the next step for me. And being able to prove the educational aspect of it just based on one day on this show floor this year, it will be no problem for me. There's so much value in it. And it's just, there's just so much that can be done with it. And I have to actually present a full report on my participation in the event to my leadership and be able to show what I learned and how I'm going to apply it. And like, that's just, it's so invaluable. I really think that, and I'm actually surprised there are as few CTSM certified people as there are. I thought there were more, and I read the stats on it last week, and I thought there were more than there are. So again, something on exhibitors' behalf, I feel like could be promoted more. And it, again, like you said, you can't go to college and learn this. Something that I always tell people is, I don't call myself a marketer. Like, to me, there's a difference. Somebody who goes to college and gets a degree in marketing, or somebody who has all these marketing certificates, absolutely, that's a part of it. But I work as a collaborative marketing team of dozens of people, but I am the trade show. And that's, to me, where the difference is truly focused education on your participation in trade shows. You're absolutely right. You can't get it anywhere else.
Yeah. And I would even argue not to say that someone doesn't need the certification, because I think it's great. It's something that you obtain, makes you feel good. I would just argue like that the things that you're learning, you're going to take them and go produce results. Like, you just are. It's like when you go to, I'm just talking through this as I'm thinking right now, but it's like when you go to a conference and you listen to a whole bunch of keynotes, you're just hoping to pull something, right? And sometimes they're very general, right? They can be general. But when you go to Exhibitor Live and you're in CTSM program, it's not general. It's very specific. The classes are specific. You get to choose which ones you want to be in to help you to solve the problems that you need to solve. So I would even say, if I'm selling someone, certificate or no certificate, I'm bringing back information and ideas that can be applied to help business initiatives, which is hopefully what, leadership wants.
And that's
if not, we're all in trouble.
That's just the kickoff point. Like, it literally attending those classes and being a part of that educational and getting exposure to those industry experts, it just kicks open more doors. It just gives you more opportunity to reach out. And these people, there's so many people that I met and saw that are more than willing to share their years of expertise and their knowledge, and are just thirsty for it, that want to help you. And so many people that don't even know that those opportunities exist is definitely is what I kind of feel at this point.
Any other key takeaways that maybe you had from your seat, whether it's, next time bring your team, what you brought back to your team, things that you saw, change in the event, any other, takeaways you think is important to share?
I think that, so a big part of the team that I'm on, they also manage private events. That a lot of companies of Seagate's size, not only do they have really robust trade show programs, but they also do a lot of private events. We do, for in a sales capacity and an internal capacity, we buy out entire hotels and host 500 salespeople once a year. And it's a 5-day event. And there's a lot of collaboration and vendors that go into that. I encountered a strong handful of suppliers that lean into that part of the industry that frankly is not my expertise and is not where my passion is. But I found myself taking information from them and writing down that information and being like, wow, I really should have brought this person with me. They really would have benefited from this. So I think that there's definitely value in people who aren't necessarily trade show specific, because there's a lot of other event access, supplier access there. I thought that was really valuable. And Again, it's just the collaboration. I had so much fun talking to people that are there to advocate for what we do. Like I see Jessica's on the call right now, and I'm
Oh
so
yeah.
in love with what she's doing. And I connected with women in exhibitions, and I had fun going over to EDPA. And I'm old enough to remember when it was exhibits in the EDPA and talk about my history and my knowledge of them. Like there's just so much opportunity. And the collaborative part of it, it was honestly my biggest takeaway, meeting people like you, watching Pablo jump up and down, talking about the ways that, we connect on pre-event marketing and things like that. Like it's so inspirational. And I think there's so much value in it. For somebody who's never been, I would sing the praises of the collaborative opportunities just from being at that show for one day.
I like a lot what you said about the idea with host events, right? Because when we, through our podcast, we talk a lot about host events, right? We try to take what event marketers, event managers, or trade show managers are doing. They are tasked with a lot. Host events is becoming a bigger piece. I do think that the trade show world at times, and this is not, I'm not saying this about exhibitor themselves. I'm saying the trade show world as in its entirety. I think we get very stuck in like trade show, trade show, trade show. And it's like, hey, at the end of the day, sometimes the trade show is not the way to go. Sometimes the host event, bring the people to you, bring in your customers, deliver your own experience. So I
Yep.
think that is an interesting take. I didn't think about that when I was there, but now that you're saying it, I think it's a great take because host events are really not that different. Yeah, there's a different layer of planning to them than planning a trade show, right? There's
Right.
different nuances and subtleties, but essentially there are a lot of similarities, and the goals and the objectives and what you're trying to accomplish by activating in an exhibit or activating by hosting an event are very similar.
Sure. And a lot of people aren't lucky enough. I'm very lucky in that my team has a couple of very much owned event experts, and I stay in my lane in trade show, and I help where I can, and I get involved. I'm always a part of those events, but I'm by no means an expert.
Yeah.
And a lot of corporations are really consolidating those positions, and someone who's responsible for managing a trade show program is also responsible for managing those owned events. And so it's to their benefit, and especially people that are new to the industry, it's to their benefit to get that education as well, to just, stack their skill set and be able to understand those nuances of owned events versus trade show.
And I think event marketers need to have their knowledge on them because they have to understand how to deploy their budget, right? Yep. You can it is okay, like to go to your leadership and say, hey, this trade show that we've done for 30 years, it doesn't work. It doesn't drive results. We're not getting what we need out of it. But hey, by the way, we might be able to run this intimate 100-person, which could turn into, you're saying a 500-person, right? Like it could turn into something big. But how do you shift budget? How do you shift direction? Because essentially, it is all about, at the end of the day, like event marketers, managers need to know it's about driving results towards business objectives that the business needs, right? That marketing's trying to accomplish. Jessica is going to come on and share some takes.
Awesome.
I don't know if everybody knows Jessica. You should. She's from the Exhibitor Advocate. Lovely lady. Good friend of mine. I'm going to let her go.
I appreciate that very much. It's so nice to hear Mandy and you, Matt, talk about the CTSM program. I'm a CTSM graduate. I couldn't stay for the graduation this year, but I upgraded. So the learning never stops. And I think, as you guys are talking about the CTSM program, I think back on my own experience. And one of the first experiences that I had with the program was walking into Kimberly Key's budgeting class. And this is going way, way back, but I know she's still doing the budgeting class. What I was so impressed with at ExhibitorLIVE was being able to get more than just those nuggets that you talked about, Matt. It was being able to get tangible, real tools that I could walk away with and actually use for my own program. I'm pretty sure that 20 years later, my budget spreadsheet still probably looks identical to what Kimberly Key created, right? Like those tools and resources in the CTSM program are incredibly valuable. But I think another thing that is incredibly valuable and underutilized at ExhibitorLIVE is the flash sessions and the conversations that are happening on the show floor. I think a lot of attendees tend to be a little fearful of walking on the show floor sometimes, right? If you're not in the market to buy something, it's intimidating to walk on a show floor with a bunch of exhibitors who are going to sell to you, right? But there's so much happening on the show floor that I think people missed this year.
Yeah.
We did a flash session with myself and Julie Kagi from ESCA, the General Service Contractors Association, and Joanne Sanders from the IATSE Union. And I think I'm so disappointed that there weren't more people there, because it was an incredible discussion. And it's one of those special magical things that happens at Exhibitor Live that you just don't get anywhere else.
Mhm.
The Exhibitor Advocate is putting out our rate survey. So we looked at labor and show service materials rates from 169 events over 24 US cities over the course of 2023. And we will be launching a survey showcasing what those average rates are in the trade show industry. So we presented a couple of snippets of the data from that survey and had a discussion with ESCA and the union about why rates are changing the way they are. Why are they going up? What is going up, and what are the consequences to an exhibitor about rates that are increasing if the value at your show is not increasing? And we will not always agree from every stakeholder group about all issues in this industry, but we have to start getting comfortable talking about them. And Exhibitor Live provides the platform to have those discussions. And so to be able to talk about the hard stuff with the unions and have an open forum for the attendees at the show to ask questions of the union and the GCs is just an opportunity you won't get anywhere else.
For sure. Jessica, let me ask you something, because I think it's interesting. We got a few more people. I want them to come on and give a takeaway, but your takeaway I really liked, because it's something that I thought about when I was there. I don't know if it's my takeaway yet, but it essentially is the mix of education. It is heavy education, right? Like, I know this year they stopped the education, I believe it was on Tuesday, so people go to the show floor. But is there a piece, a bit of a gap here, because people really do go there for the education and to catch their classes, that layering in the show floor, layering in people moving around, checking out vendors, checking out suppliers, exhibit houses, whatever it may be, that just goes missing, that there's a little bit of a missing component there for the CTSM folk? I know from talking to people through our podcast who go to SEMA, who go to EMS, who go to all these different shows. And one of my biggest gripes with all this is that it's a little meat markety in how do you get around it? Right. And
Yeah.
I think some want it more than others, but I feel Exhibitor has a really nice angle with the education, but there's a bit of a gap in getting people to the floor, getting them moving around, getting them feeling okay that they can just go explore, right? Go explore, go see who's out there. Like, selfishly, as an exhibit house, I want people to go explore. I don't need to dog you for the next 5 weeks after you leave our space. I want you to know who we are. I want you to gain an understanding of what we're about, why we're there. So I just want your take on that. I'm very curious about that.
Yeah, I think it's 100% accurate, right? We as an industry need to do this better than anybody, right? We talk about this all the time. We talk about matchmaking opportunities where show organizer matchmakes between exhibitors and the attendee, right? We talk about the importance of exhibitors using the data that they get from the attendee base responsibly and making sure that we're not spamming the entire attendee base, right? Making sure that we're engaging the attendees that are walking the show floor in a fun way and a responsible way, and not making it me markety, right? So I think we of
it's a
all
bad
people,
term. I just threw it out there. Yeah, I don't know how else to say
we
it.
of all people should be able to do it right. And I love the changes that Exhibitor Live is making. I love the way they set up the stage and the flash session environment so that it is easy to walk into that space and have those discussions and attend those meetings. I think we can do a little bit more to encourage those attendees to feel comfortable walking the show floor. And some of that's on show management side and some of that's on the exhibitor side at this particular event, right? So I think it's an ecosystem like we've talked about, and we need to do each of our parts in helping the attendees feel comfortable and confident to walk into that space and be delighted and surprised by the education they get on the show floor, not just in the CTSM sessions.
Yeah, I think you want them to go explore. And then I think that's on more exhibitor association type, right? To go get them to encourage it. And then it's on people like myself, if we were to exhibit, to deliver an experience to them. What are they gaining when they come to your booth? Pablo, you said Dia wants to come on. I would love to hear from Dia.
Dia is on, even though I'm a little shocked Jessica didn't say anything about the power of karaoke, but it's your turn, Dia.
Oh, don't even get us started. Yeah,
if
don't get
anybody
us
just
started.
wants some reason to go to the show, it might be Pablo. So Lauren, you might want to consider putting Pablo on stage at some point.
I am going to put the video on LinkedIn when I'm feeling it a little bit. I'm going to put him out there and tag him. Dia, go ahead. What's your biggest takeaway other than Pablo's amazing at karaoke?
Yeah, you might be an event marketer if you developed a list of 6 items you wanted to talk about on this podcast. Number one, I found my people. You know, I've been looking for my people because it's so hard to find people who are in the event space doing what you're doing, even just in your neighborhood. And it was so refreshing to go in to Exhibitor Live. And this is my first time attending. It's not because I didn't want to attend in the past, but because my company, I'm with the company, he values that kind of education and said, sure, go. But to be able to have conversations with people and they understand your nomenclature, they get it. You don't have to explain yourself. So that was the first thing I learned. The second was I totally agree with Mandy on the whole sustainability thing. I was really looking into that myself. The third thing is I noticed that the exhibitors at Exhibitor Live have the same trouble with booth etiquette that the whole rest of the world does. And everybody should just have booth staff training, no matter what. The fourth thing that I learned is I'm loving the email marketing because I'm seeing pieces, you know, stuff that the exhibitors were sending to me ahead of time and post show. And I'm actually forwarding that to my digital marketing manager in my company and go, this is what I liked about this. I got an email today from a guy who said, hey, it was great meeting on the show floor. Well, I'm at 100 people on the show floor. But he sent a picture of his booth with it. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that guy because I remember that piece about that booth that I really liked. And so that was pretty slick. And the last 2 points kind of roll in together. The biggest thing is I only took one class at this. I was really gun shy about asking my company to spend $2,500 to $3,000 on this event. So I kind of scaled it back. I took the ROI class and yes, immediately there's so much I can implement now. I've got a show in 2 weeks and I've got a call with one of my team members to say, what low hanging fruit can we pick at this show with what I learned a week ago? I missed the flash sessions on the show floor. Now I'm wishing I'd gone to them, but I was only at the show for 1 day. So I was trying to hit the entire show floor in 5 hours, which I don't recommend. And then the last thing that I've got my evil plan in place. I figured out how I'm going to do the CTSM and I'm going to get my company to pay for all of it. So that's my plan starting next year.
I love that, Dia. I think you should be getting them. You should be asking them, right? I think a little bit of what Mandy said, a little bit of what I said, maybe you being there this year and seeing, you have your own thoughts on like, okay, how do I go to them and ask? Because ultimately to me, the sell, like everything that I hear over and over from people like yourself, from people like Mandy, from people that we have on our show and we've talked to for, God, we've been doing it for 1.5 years now, is like, it's that pure connection. It's the relationships. It's your tribe. It's your people. They're doing the same job as you, the same work as you. They have the same struggles as you. So I think that's really great to hear. Pablo, did you say Liz is coming on?
Liz is coming on. I remember seeing Dia running up and down the show floor with like this like epic document map of like making sure that she saw every single booth. I was like, I hope she comes today. I'm glad he came. Dia. Thank you.
She had a little bit of like a mom at Disney type thing going where like you just had to get to all the different pieces and she was ready for that single day.
I was on a mission and I learned to use my program to take all my notes. So
there you go.
I mean, silly stuff, but hey, it worked.
Feel like you conquered it. Liz, what's going on? Welcome.
Hello, good to be here. Thanks for pulling this together, Matt. So my takeaways, first of all, I agree with most of what I've heard here, which is that overall it felt like a better show than it has in a while. And I was really energized by that. Just the whole vibe of it, the show floor, the people there, and the collaborations, like you said, Mandy. In the comment about, driving more folks like yourself, Mandy and Dia there, I totally agree. I think that's been a challenge for the show. And to the point about, is it awkward or do you feel comfortable walking on the show floor? I wonder if there were more of you, if it would feel less awkward because you wouldn't be like so focused on because you just be one of many versus one of few. So I think there's definitely an opportunity there. The third thing is I attended a session that one of our clients was presenting, Nadra and Yost from Philips. And my biggest takeaway from this was she was talking about how to create kind of event elements that are repeatable to save money, things they do at big shows, how they can apply it to smaller shows. And in that session was a competitor of theirs. I think she was from Samsung, and Philips does a lot of, radiology type shows. And the person from Samsung raised her hand and said, I know we're competitors, but I really like this, that, and the other thing that you said. And Nadra said, we're not competitors. Like maybe our businesses are, but we are actually on the same team. And so I'm happy that I can help you in your job at that company, learning from some of the things we've learned. And I thought that was very refreshing because you don't always hear people, number one, like Nadra sharing some of this special sauce and then having someone in the audience really, truly appreciate that. And I thought it was so kind of, like I say, refreshing. And then the other thing that came out of that session is I know Nadra is part of the exhibitor advocate, but she really, I think, organically talked about elements of that and the importance of that as part of her presentation. And I think that was one of the most impactful points of discussion that ended up coming out of the Q&A at the end of her session was all these other folks in the room who maybe didn't fully understand what the exhibitor advocate was, but after they heard her talking about it specifically in reference to her programs and some of the challenges and battles she's fought with associations and all those things, it clicked for them, which I thought was great because obviously I'm a big supporter of the exhibitor advocate, but to see it like click with people, I thought was just a great application. And back to your point, Mandy, about collaboration, it's like all these different things all coming together because you've got all the right people in one place at the same time. So whether it's exhibitor or EMS or SEMA or these other places, like we are the folks that do this for a living. And so it's really fun and inspiring to be together whenever we can.
Liz, I think those are really good takes. God, I'm just thinking, I wrote a note here. So one of the things I think that's interesting is talking about with the competitors, right? With Philips and Samsung. I think our industry needs to get way better at it. We have this habit of talking like we are good at it, but I don't think we're good at it. I think we're actually quite poor at it. I think it's a lot of small business. It's a lot of segregation in the industry. So that's why, I've told my company that is the reason why. If you go back and listen to, I don't know, Pablo, how many episodes are we? 90 right now? 80 something? I don't know.
I think whatever. 80. I think low 80s. Yeah.
You go back and listen to our podcast. I talk about exhibitor advocate. We've had Jessica on, right? I've talked about the CTSM program countless times, right? We have nothing to do with it. Zero, right? I even recall when we had on John Wolf, who runs events globally for Lenovo. John talked about going to events and seeking out and having conversations with his competitors. Literally seeking out and having those. So I think one of the message from what you're saying and that I think is share, collaborate, right? Essentially, you're going to know who's kind of somebody you don't want to right away. There's just people that are never going to do it. They're never going to jump over the fence, but sometimes you just have to be the one to do it. And I think like the best example I could give is when in my process of trying to build Rockway, right? In 2014, when I did not know what I was doing, Rick Bellergeau from Momentum Labor Company introduced me to Dick Wheeler, Dick Wheeler owns Pro Exhibits out in California. Dick would technically be a competitor of mine. Now, granted, he's in San Francisco. I'm in Orlando. At the time, I don't even think Dick knew where I was located, right? Or what I was doing. Dick got on a phone call with me after EDPA and explained margins to me. Not what they were, but he explained to me where I need to be and what I should be aiming for. And this was a direct competitor, something I've never forgotten, things I try to do for other people. And I think that community, that tribe, and you seeing a little bit of that at Exhibitor is awesome. And it's something that we need more of, without a doubt.
Awesome. Thanks for hopping on, Liz. Yeah. Matt, I want to kind of give it to you for your final takes, but if I may give my one take that I would like to share.
Pablo, you were there. You were quite the star. I would love to know your takeaways.
My number one, I think I don't want to overlap on any of your takeaways, which I think we have a lot of similar ones, but I think I'm allowed to say this one, and it's trickier for you to say it, but I felt walking that floor, right? I echo a lot with, is it Dia that said, found my people, right? Like I've never self-identified as an event marketer, but I very much do right now. My formation has largely come from small events and nonprofit stuff and just kind of doing different things the way that, you know, I'm just trying to bring people together, and listening to this podcast obsessively for the last year because I produce it, right? And walking the show floor, I had this like huge vision going in of like, all right, I'm going to walk the show floor. I'm going to be able to identify everybody's narrative and story that they're telling me. And I'm going to be able to see all these different things that I find as like cutting edge event marketing stuff that I can now identify. And I was kind of shocked to see how few booths actually executed on that. How few booths were telling a story as opposed to showing up and trying to look cool. I thought was really, really telling, which goes back to this idea that education out there and sharing of knowledge and all this different stuff that we can do not only is an opportunity to make the industry better, but it's a giant opportunity in someone's career right now, right? Like I feel so equipped to like just go and be somebody that can like opine on exhibits and trade show execution, thanks to the little bit that I have in experience from like listening to this stuff and whatnot, that I think it's a giant opportunity for other folks, when really I only saw about like 2, maybe 3 booths on ExhibitorLIVE, which is the trade show about trade shows, executing on a story through their booth.
Yeah, you definitely can say something like that I can't, right? Like you can say that because, you know, we didn't exhibit, right? So it's that whole kind of like, you know, man, woman in the arena quote where we didn't do it. So for me to criticize others, not something I'm overly interested in, right? But I think your take on it, definitely you may have others that, you know, really align with it.
Can I say something real quick on that?
Yeah, please do.
So it's actually, I love the point that Pablo just made, and I'll say, and I wouldn't even say that it's a criticism, because it is definitely, it's one of the harder things to do in the position when you are exhibiting at an event, when you are participating, even a company like mine that's 40 plus years old and established in our industry. When I go to the leadership and I'm like, what's the story? What's the narrative? What are we telling people? I think it's actually more commonplace. And so I'm not surprised that exhibit houses are doing it, or suppliers. It is more commonplace to put the best aesthetic forward and to put the best of what you're putting out there forward. And then you're standing in that space and you're just hoping it's going to attract the right people. And I can say that I'm currently on the uphill quest of what's the narrative with what I do. So I'm actually not surprised that there are a lot of exhibitors at the show that stumbled with that. That would be an education piece that I would voraciously follow, is more education about how to work with your marketing teams and your leadership on how to truly create a trade show narrative. That's something that I feel is definitely lacking in more places than I can count.
It's a great add in there, Mandy. I was actually thinking, as Pablo was saying, that bit of a takeaway that I had was essentially that, you know, Pablo and I taught a 90-minute class. I had probably more fun than I thought I would teaching the class. Honestly, it was a lot of fun. I did think afterwards that we didn't name the class properly in terms of a name. It was a little different. It was catchy, but to what you were saying, I mean, a big chunk of what Pablo and I taught that I felt super passionate about was teaching people about point of view from a company, messaging, story, narrative, and how to incorporate and build that into exhibits. I mean, that was the bulk of where we got caught in the middle, Pablo, that we talked about over and over and over about how you show up at a trade show and empathy for the customer and the way that you sort of engage them by letting them know that you see them, right? So it's a really interesting take on that, because I do think it's so important, and we are in the business of delivering experience, not delivering a trade show booth for the sake of a trade show booth. You know what I mean? Some of the stuff that I kind of took away, just to close this out. And if anybody has anything, raise your hand. You can pop in the chat. And Pablo will create a queue again, but I'll sort of run with a couple things that I had. One would be, I think as an industry, if I was speaking to other exhibit houses, right? You know, competitors of ours, suppliers, just anybody in our space, is that the event marketer and the event manager is constantly being asked to do more with less. This is a theme that I took from talking to so many people. They are under the gun. They are understaffed, under-resourced. They're hectic. They're busy. It's just a lot going on. It's a lot to wrangle, a lot to pull in to get executed. I think we as an industry need to have a little more empathy for that, and empathy by means of solving problems for them. Where can you solve a problem for the event marketer, right? Like I made the meat market thing about everybody wants to get in front of the director of events and sell them, but how about a little bit of empathy and say, hey, you know what? Like, I think I can help you here. And I know that you need help there because you're under-resourced, right? Because you're all of those things. The next thing it takes me to is something along the lines of ROI and ROO, right? Return on investment, return on objectives. And I think this is something that's still plaguing our industry. It's something that's not, I don't want to say talked about enough, but there's not enough solutions in place. And I think there's too many people just going through the motions. There's, in particular on my side, and my company included, not stepping up to the plate of trying to understand what it is that somebody's trying to accomplish and help them find a way to go actually accomplish it, because we are going to have to evolve as an industry with ROI and ROO. Right? We have to show business case. We have to help event managers and marketers create a real business case. And yes, Mandy, Explory is doing some really great stuff. I spent a ton of time with Mark, with Chloe, with Sophie. They are great people. You know, we've had them on the show. I had both Mark and Chloe on the show to sort of spread what they're doing. We were pretty careful to try and not to pitch, right? Max beats everybody, but just have the conversation. But I think it's another takeaway that I'm still not hearing enough, and I'm not seeing enough action out of everything that's going on. One of the other things, and you know, this is something that Pablo and I talked about, is like events is guerrilla marketing. It is how creative can you be when you go to a show floor. It's not just the bones of it of your trade show booth. You know, people want to understand how to get people there. Dia was talking about emailing, right? When you're emailing people afterwards. I mean, who's going to get most creative? Who's going to help drive results? And I think it's about being crafty. I think it's about being scrappy. And I think event marketers see themselves that way because they are that way to a degree. I would just love to see that scrappiness transition from planning and management into the marketing piece, getting scrappy about the marketing edge of things. Like, for perfect example, the reason I work with Pablo so closely and so much is because he's so scrappy. He's always thinking how to connect the dots with people, and he's just like disgustingly friendly, like to a fault, right? So I think that's something as kind of a take that I see, that a transition I'd love to see. And that's something that my company is focused on right now, is how do we help people do that? How do we give them that little bit of extra juice when they're going to shows? Yes, Mandy, he does wear cool jackets. The jackets was an absolute key focal point. Key focal point. Pablo's going to rub that in my face for the next 10 years. So does anybody else have anything? Is there any key takes from conversation? Anything anybody would love to close with or jump in? And even if anybody wants to ask anything here, I have one final thing, but other than that, wanted to make sure before I close out. All right, I'm going to wrap it up. I think we talked a lot about Exhibitor. I think my overall take from the show, and just transparent with everybody, 2023, we exhibited. 2024, we did not. We chose not to. And I think we chose not to for a lot of the reasons that I saw on the convention center hall. Like, I felt some of our competitors kind of downsized. We're waiting to see what Exhibitor does with this show. Be adamant in telling people. I think Exhibitor put their best foot forward, just in my opinion. With that said, I think there is a lot of work to be done. I'm really interested to see the data and how that comes out. And I know my company and myself are watching and waiting. Overall, though, good show, good city, much better vibes, much better energy. I think it's important for everybody to understand with Exhibitor Live, the ecosystem starts with the event manager and the event marketer. If event managers and marketers are not going to this show and are not energized by the show the way Mandy is, the way Dia is, where they're getting an education and they're also confident enough to walk the floor, confident enough to just go explore, go meet people, go see, not feeling pressured to get sold or that they have to, I think the ecosystem will work because there are very good suppliers. There are people solving problems. There are really good exhibit houses. There are also people not solving problems. There are also really bad exhibit houses. There are also suppliers that are no good. And I think that the people walking the floor, this is an opportunity face to face to meet, to see, to be able to make your own decision, to make your own judgments. I think we have to kind of find a way to spread the word about the education, about it, making sure that executives can understand the value of sending people. And I don't know how to solve the problem for exhibitor. They have their own problems to solve. And I think they're taking steps in the right direction, but it is trying to solidify that show floor and getting people to be able to go explore confidently because it's out there and drawing their own conclusions as they're on that floor. So everybody, awesome impromptu show. We hope this was helpful. We hope this was positive. We hope this was a good experience. Thanks for Mandy for showing up, giving her thoughts. Mandy, it was incredible meeting you on the floor. Honestly, Pablo's couldn't get on the plane. His head was so bloated. He almost didn't get on the airplane. They wouldn't let him in. But no, seriously, made me and my team, your words about our podcast and our show and the work that what we are trying to do and making an effort to do. Honestly, it filled us up. It made us feel really, really good and gives us more gas in the tank to keep doing what we're doing. And thanks for sharing today. Thanks for, Dia, Liz, thanks for everybody who came on to share.
Thank you so much. It was really great to meet you and everyone else that I met that last week was great. And if I haven't met you yet and you're on here, please let's connect because I am just hungry for that collaboration that these kinds of conversations bring. So thank you so much.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Thank you so much.